Welcome back to the Practical Church Podcast. My name is Dotson, and this show is all about helping you plant and grow healthy churches. Today, I'm going to share with you 7 ways to avoid an overloading church calendar, how to plan and space things out so it's not too much, but also that you don't have periods of things not going on. As always, this show is brought to you in partnership with Mission Support. They offer a number of services, including things like graphics and videos for your church. You'll actually be amazed at how outsourcing your graphics and video editing to their media specialists will save you money, free up your time, and make your church feel like it is a professional level media department. They support unique one-time projects as well as offering monthly comprehensive media support. So they have plans that include sermon graphics, event graphics, postcards, signage, social media posts, recap videos, sermon bumpers, testimony and story videos, and more. So as always, be sure to check out missionsupport.com today so that they can help you love being a pastor again. And in today's episode, let's get into it. 7 ways to avoid an overloading church calendar. Now, as we talk about these tips today, it's obviously some things to keep in mind. This will vary a lot by the size of your church. So if you're a really big church, this is going to be different than if you're like a brand new church plant. And anywhere in between, my goal is just to give you some things that we've done in New City, some things to think through. This is not the best or the only. This is just some ways to, hey, I've never thought of it that way, or we might want to try that, or hey, that suggestion actually doesn't work, and here's the reasons why. So again, this is just things that we've been through. These are general principles that will vary based on the size of your church, the context of your church. But yeah, there's still some things that can actually be helpful. And so that being said, with that caveat, here we go. 7 ways to avoid an overloading church calendar. Here is the first tip. And that is my recommendation is to plan your church calendar about 6 to 12 months out while knowing that things can change. Now, again, it depends on largely the size of your church. If you're a bigger church, then you might have to do a lot more than that. Although I do think it is funny sometimes when I come across guys that have got like 2 years worth of events planned. Now, I'm not saying this is not like a preaching calendar or that sort of thing, but I'm just saying that there's so much can change, especially if you are a church plant or you are a small or medium-sized church. Because, people come and go, staff transitions, if you lose or have one staff transition when you have, 3 or 4 staff, it's different than having a staff transition when you have, 20 or more staff. So our rule of thumb, how we kind of operate in New City is we plan out about 6-ish, sometimes about 12-ish months at a time, typically about 6 month blocks at a time, with the caveat of like, hey, things can change, things can get different, but it's just really helpful to know, okay, where are we going? What events do we have planned? And then as other things pop up that you might want to do, you already kind of know, okay, here's what we're doing, here's where we're going. What's really not very helpful is to kind of plan things as they come or plan things a month out. Again, everything can change, but it's just helpful to know every 6-ish months, okay, where are we going from here? What changes do we need to make? It's also helpful if you have a new plan or project, event you want to do to say, okay, what have we currently planned? And then how can we move it around? Because what can often happen if you don't proactively plan a little bit out ahead of time, that you might have a certain event or thing you want to do, and you keep just moving it or pushing it because something else pops up. And so when you already have a pre-planned calendar, or at least a somewhat pre-planned calendar, if you have this new idea or new initiative or whatever it might be, okay, well, we've got this plan and we want to do this thing as well. So like, where should we move it if we're going to put this in there? Now, I'm going to talk about more here in a minute about like how to plan things and when to plan things and how to space things out. But just generally speaking, our kind of rule of thumb is about typically for us, the rhythm we've got into is about 6 months at a time. So, in the fall-ish time, October, ish, we'll kind of plan the first 6 months, of the year. And then, the early springish time, we'll kind of plan the next 6 months of the year. So we always kind of have a good kind of little bit of a run day of where things are going. And of course, things can absolutely move around, but you don't just want things popping up. This also helps, again, if you're more of a small to medium sized church, when, you have people in your church that have ideas of things they want to do. If you don't have things planned, it's maybe harder for you to say, well, no, can't we do it? Or here's why, or we got this church calendar planned. When you've got more things planned out, it makes you look like you kind of I've thought more intentionally, but it's also just a lot easier to say no to things that your church shouldn't be doing anyway, because you've been more proactive planning on what you actually should be doing. So my recommendation is about 6 to 12 months out at a time. Obviously things can change as they come up, but at least having a good plan that you can start from and edit as needed. That is number one. Number two, I would keep this in mind. There is a difference between Sunday events and non-Sunday events. So when you're planning your church calendar, at least how we kind of do it at New City, Sunday events aren't quote unquote that big of a deal, or that have to be planned for by your people that much, because they're generally speaking already there. If you have an event on a Thursday night or a Friday night or a Saturday or whatever, and it's not a Sunday event, that takes a little bit more bandwidth from people that they have to plan and prepare for. So for us, if we do things on a Sunday, we don't really kind of like, we aren't as careful about planning other things around it if it's on a Sunday. Now, you don't want to talk about in a second about having multiple things in the same weekend. So let's say you actually have like a Saturday event and then you have like a Sunday after church thing. You don't want to do that because communicating multiple things on the same weekend is confusing. But like for us, if we have a Sunday event coming up the next week or two, if we have a non-Sunday event, we're not very concerned about those being close together, because a Sunday after church event doesn't feel like a lot for your people because they're already there. So let's say you're having a cookout, or you're having some meetings, some follow-up, whatever. If they're already there, again, they're not necessarily having to go out of their way to rearrange their time, childcare schedule, all that sort of thing. And so I would say, as you're planning your events and you want to space them out, and I'll give some tips on kind of how we do that here in a second, but just know that like a non-Sunday event is a bigger ask, and it takes more than a Sunday event. So, for example, as I'm recording this, in a couple of weeks, we are collecting backpacks for the school that our church meets in. And the last Sunday of that backpack drive is also our women's event. So I guess you could kind of say on 2 Sundays, we have 2 things going on at once on the same Sunday. But again, the type of event matters. So the women's event they're already there. They're just staying. The backpack event, we're collecting for multiple weeks, but it's not something we're asking people to like go out of their way and put on their calendar. And so that also matters, like what the event actually is. And if you're doing like a donation drive or something like that, obviously that doesn't get away. That does not get in the way of an outside event. However, it does get in the way of how you're going to announce things, which I'll talk more in a second. But for this point, again, I just want to say this. There is a difference between Sunday events and non-Sunday events, and you want to keep that in mind as you're planning. Sunday events don't require a lot from your people as much as they would as a non-Sunday event. So kind of the ask there, the planning there is different. And so you can kind of do, I'll have to say, a Sunday event closer to a non-Sunday event, whereas if you have 2 non-Sunday events, let's say back-to-back weeks, that can be a bigger ask, especially if it's a thing that you're like opening up to a large percentage of your church. Maybe not everyone at your church is going to go, obviously, but if it's something that's open to everybody and it's like, hey, this week we got this thing on Tuesday night, and next week we got this thing on Thursday night, that's a lot different than, hey, this coming Sunday after church, just hang out, we got this thing, and the next week on Thursday night, we got this thing, because that Sunday doesn't feel like an ask, if that makes sense. So there's a difference between a Sunday event and a non-Sunday event. So just keep that in mind as you're planning your calendar. Sunday events are a lot easier, and you can do those closer in conjunction with other things because it doesn't feel like necessarily a big ask for people to attend. That said, point number 3. Don't plan multiple things the same week or weekend if it is a larger church ask or invitation. So you don't want to plan multiple things in the same week or weekend if it's a larger church ask or invitation. By larger church, I don't mean like this is only for large churches. I mean like if it's an event that is open to like most of your church body if they want to come. Now, of course, you're going to have multiple things going on at all times. So you might have community groups or a youth, middle school, high school event at the same time as you have like maybe a Friday night marriage event, that sort of thing. So the difference here is like there's a difference between recurring events that happen all the time that you're not necessarily like announcing from stage every week as well, than like having like one-off events that are happening on the same week, because it can really take away the momentum of what you have going on. Now, you might say, well, we're doing a Tuesday night thing here and a Saturday event here on the same week, but they're like for different audiences. Most people aren't going to go to both, so we're just going to announce them both. And I would just say, yes, it's true. While not, most people aren't going to go to both, what happens is when you the more things you share that are coming up at once, the harder it is for people to know like what's actually important and what should I actually do. And the easier it is to drown out all of it and just kind of like ignore all of it. And so you just want to be conscious of that. If you have like 2 big things going on in the same week, again, there's sometimes you can't afford it and that happens, but you just need to be conscious of like, if you're doing multiple things at the same time, then people are going to be kind of confused of like, hey, what should we do here? I'll point this out too. This goes back to my first point being planned out. A couple years ago, we had someone who wanted to plan this women's event and not on staff, which is fine. Like we're happy with people who don't go to UC to do stuff, but they wanted it to be like a church run women's event that they were doing. And one of the problems was like, we just didn't trust that it was going to be like well run. And so to put our new city's name behind it and not be well run, it's not good. The other thing is, this person would try to plan they would just say, hey, we want to do an event this weekend, or we want to do an event this weekend, and not ask like, hey, what's going on with the church? What else is going on? And so there was a time where I said, hey, like, if you want to do something, that's fine. And we might not announce it from stage, but we could announce it other ways, but it can't be the same weekend we have something else going on. And so one time this person really wanted to do some women's event that wasn't really good with what we wanted to do. And so we weren't going to promote it, whatever. But also it was like, they wanted to do it on a Saturday. And it was this thing that's like 30 minutes away. It was like this serve event that not anywhere near Raleigh. And I don't remember what it was. We had something else either going on that Friday night. I think we had like maybe a trivia night, or that Sunday afternoon or something. And so I was like, well, we need to be able to plan better. And here's why, because we already have this event happening this weekend. And although this is just a women's event and this is something different, we don't want to be announcing, hey, Friday night we got this, and then Saturday morning we got this, and then also like come back to church on Sunday. It just feels like a lot. So people can do whatever they want. This is really just really about like the bigger church events, especially the church events that you're going to be announcing, or especially the bigger one-off events. You want to try to avoid doing multiple in one week, even if one's on a Monday and one's on a Friday, and even if the audiences aren't quite the same. Again, this is generally speaking, there are exceptions, and there are reasons why this doesn't always work out. But if you're constantly having like multiple things going on every single week, this is where people start to drown out and not listen. This is also what makes announcement time go long. Now, I've shared various episodes on your next step in announcement time and how to do that better. One of the things is you announce everything and then you're not proactive with your calendar. And so you've got like 13 things going on in 1 month. And the next month you've got like 2 things going on. It's just very chaotic. And again, nobody listens during the announcement time because it goes on for like 10 minutes. And the other problem is when you announce a lot of things, and maybe half the things you announce isn't relevant to somebody, they just kind of tune out everything. So all that to say, don't plan multiple things the same week or weekend if it is a larger church ask or invitation. It's not to say you can't do multiple things, but especially if you're going to announce it from stage or you want a lot of people to go to it, you don't want to do, hey, let's have multiple people come and let's announce multiple things in 1 week. It's helpful to like plan out your church calendar, because again, the exercise that we go through, we do this, we kind of like list all the things that we want to do, and then we start putting them on the calendar, and then we kind of realize, oh, this event is too close to this, or, something like that. It allows us to see, okay, hey, let's like space these things out better, because we want to do both, but we don't want to do them like back to back. The other thing to consider too is if it's an event where people need to like serve at it, and it's like not just, hey, come to this thing, but also do something, that takes a little bit of your currency every time you ask someone to do something. And if you're asking people to go to 2 church events during the week, one-off events, and you need people to serve at both, even if you just need some people to serve at one and different people to serve at the other, it just feels like a bigger ask. So all I say, don't plan multiple things the same week or weekend if it is a larger church ask or invitation. Again, the one caveat there is that if you have an event coming, like let's say on a Wednesday night, and then you have a church event on a Sunday after church, again, you can kind of get away with those because the Sunday after church is like just, you're already here, just hang out. You're not asking people to go to 2 things outside of their already scheduled rhythm. So that's the caveat there. But generally speaking, don't plan multiple things on the same week or weekend, because it can kind of be hard for people to know what's actually the most important. Number 4, consider what you will announce from stage, from email, and your various forms of communication when making your schedule. So again, our kind of rule of thumb at New City is we will announce things from stage that are more church-wide for about 3-ish weeks before the event. So whether we got community groups coming up as of right now, so we're talking about those for a couple of weeks. We might have a men's or women's event that we want to highlight. Pretty soon, we're going to have our trunk or treat that we do every year. This year, doing at the school that we're meeting at. There are some exceptions again to the 3-ish week rule. Maybe it's Easter or Christmas, that sort of thing. But generally speaking, again, this helps to like reduce the number of announcements and having people actually listen. Is that we have like a 3-week rule. Now, what this means is if we have multiple events that are going on, and we're going to announce things about 3 weeks before they happen, then what can happen if we're not careful with our calendar is that we could have an event every single week for the next 3 weeks. And they might be different. One might be a Sunday only thing, so it doesn't feel like an ask. And then one might be this event, and one might be a donation drive. There might be various things going on that maybe don't require everyone to go to everything. But if you've got like 6 announcements every single week that turns into, that can be a lot, and it just feels very crowded. Now, one of the things for us is we always mention the Connect card. In the Connect moment, if you're new, that's how we start our next steps time every single week. So that's already 1. We typically try to keep it to 3 or 4. And so if if we already have the Connect card every single week, that only gives us about 2 or 3 announcements that we try to announce from stage, which helps us try to be more strategic about when we're placing things because we want to be able to share it. Now, if it's not a big thing, obviously we will share more things in our church newsletter, and sometimes further out, like maybe a men's event or a women's event or something we want people to sign up for. We'll put that in our weekly newsletter, further out than 3 weeks before we say it from stage, or how else you maybe communicate what's going on with your church. So I would just say, as you're setting up your 6-ish month calendar, one thing it looks at, okay, if we've got this event, this event, this event, are we going to be announcing like 5 things over this 2-week time period? And also, again, when it comes to announcement, there's a difference between saying, hey, this is like we're doing a school drive, or we're doing a cookout after church. That is different than, hey, sign up for this event. Because if you're having somebody sign up for this event and for this event and for this event, like for 3 events, again, there's just, it's not, again, it's not hard to sign up for something, but it just creates a lot of friction, and it creates a lot of, okay, what's actually important here? So the type of announcement also matters as well, to what you're going on. So like, for example, this past Sunday, how we did New City, we had our Connect moment. We had our backpack drive, which you don't have to sign up for. It's just, hey, for the next 3 weeks, we're collecting backpacks, bring them on Sunday. We had a women's event that we do ask them to sign up for. And what was the other thing? So Connect, women's event, backpack drive, and community groups. So those are coming up. Obviously, if you're new, we want you to register. But if you're not, just say they're coming up. Just remind people what's going on in a couple of weeks. So you just want to space out. Like, you want people to register, asking everybody to register for a bunch of things, and that can help you space your plan. Your church calendar is like, okay, if we've got like 4 things coming up in a 3-week plan, and they're all like bigger lifts, or we want people to take, do a lot of stuff, it can be a lot. So again, there are caveats to this. So we do something maybe called the Weekender, about every 2-ish months. And so that's for new people. And so because that's for us, it was a Friday night and a Sunday morning, that's an event. But we know the vast majority of our people aren't going to that because, it's only, most people at New City have already been to it. And if you're new, you'll go to it, but it's not like a whole thing. So like for us, there are some events like maybe a next step process that we'll announce occasionally because we want especially the new people to know, but we don't really count that as like an event because we know like majority of people aren't going to that thing. So all that to say, just think about, okay, when you're looking at your calendar, how many things that you're going to have to be announcing on Sundays? And if it feels like a lot, you want to move things around and space things out a little bit. Again, the event matters. So for us, the trunk or treat we do is a big lift every year. Tons of volunteers, candy, promotional type of thing. And so we like the month of October, this is helpful to know, we don't ask people to do anything else in October because for the whole month we're talking about it. And what I mean by do, I mean like to sign up or to go to an event or to like register for something. We don't ask people to like register for something that they have to like serve at. And so again, a 3-ish week rule might say, well, you could like, after trunk or treat is over, maybe 2 weeks after, in the 2nd or 3rd week of November, you could do this, or maybe the beginning of October, you could do this. But we want to like conserve our energy in October to like not have people focus on like signing up to serve at any other event. So just be cognizant of that too. If you got a really big event you've got going on, don't be doing other stuff that you need necessarily people to serve at if you want everyone to kind of do this thing. So consider what you announce from stage, email, etc. when planning your calendar. Again, for us, it's a 3-ish week rule from stage, which helps us kind of space things out. Number 5, not everything your church does has to be a quote unquote church event. So this is important too. Not everything your church does has to be some formal event. People can plan things on their own. Again, a lot of people just assume that, hey, if you announce it from stage, people will sign up for it. So I want to announce you from stage. If you've been doing this for any length of time, you know that's not the case. The stage doesn't move the needle all that much, especially if you have too many announcements. It's more so for just kind of awareness and following up through other means. But you can't like announce everything. So like at New City, like you can do whatever you want. You can do a game night. You can have a women's event, a men's event, whatever you want to do. But it's not necessarily something that like New City is going to put on. So I would just say, hey, like if you got a lot of stuff going on, or if you got something that's like, hey, we want to do this thing and we might have a handful of people come, but it's really close to this other big event, I would say that doesn't mean don't do it. It just means, hey, this is a non like big publicized event. You can kind of do it whenever you want. What you don't want to do is like, if you have all your publicized events really close together, it just feels like there's too much going on. So we might have, a trunk or treat going on, but it doesn't mean that somebody can't do something the week before or the week after. It's just not going to be like this big church thing, if that makes sense. So just remember, not everything your church does has to be a big functional church event. And that will give you some flexibility of things you do. Or maybe it could be like a church, for lack of a better word, a church sponsored event, but it's not a big event. And so like you're okay with not doing a big push for it. In that case, you can plan those kind of as much as you want as well. Not everything your church does has to be a quote unquote church event. Just make sure that kind of the bigger church events, you actually are spacing them out. Number 6, don't close shop in the summer. That's my big recommendation. My sense of this is this has changed. I kind of sense that this has changed, at least from what I observe, which is good. Kind of the idea is like, well, the school's out, and so we don't do any groups. We don't do any, I don't know if your church has a serving thing. We don't do any worship night or prayer or fasting, or we just like kind of like take like 2.5 months off. I would say, remember, people are not gone for 2.5 months. Yes, more people are likely taking some sort of vacation in a shorter period of time. So on average, you're going to have less people around, but people are not sitting there for 2 months, like doing nothing, never leaving their house. So I would say, yes, you might take some strategic breaks and to pull back a little bit if you want, but don't pull back everything for 2 months. Because again, what that can also give you the issue of like bunching a ton of stuff up and then having nothing for a while and then bunching a ton of stuff up. You can like do stuff in the summer, and it's okay if maybe not as many people come, or it's not as big as it would be in maybe March or, October or November. But that doesn't mean do nothing. Again, new people are always coming, and especially new people in the summer might be moving into town or might be really intentional about their faith. And you don't like your friend, maybe you've been praying for a long time, showing up the first Sunday of June and have like nothing for them outside of Sundays until the end of August. So whatever that means for you, I would just encourage you to keep doing stuff. Like we don't take, I'm not saying you have to do what New City does, but our groups meet for a portion of the summer. I mean, we don't take 2.5 months off. So they don't meet the entire summer, obviously, because we take 3 community group breaks a year. One of those breaks is kind of July, August-ish, somewhere around there. But they're also meeting parts of June and parts of August. There are community groups going on, and there's things going on. So yeah, you might pull back a little bit, but don't close up shop. That's just my recommendation as you're planning, your chunks of time. And then number 7, remember, the more that you share / have going on, the less people will see the importance of going. So you do have to be a little strategic here. The more you do stuff and the more you have going on, the less people will kind of assume that they should go to that. Now, I'm not saying only do 2 events a year because then everybody will come. But I'm saying if you do something every single week, it just feels like a lot. It kind of feels like, well, I can't go to this thing this week, but they've got something next week, so I'll just go to that. And so it can kind of dilute what you're trying to do. Maybe it can dilute your community a little bit, or the connections you want your people to make in your church with one another, because you just have too much going on. You have too much to choose from. So I'm not saying that you need to do like the Simple Church model from the book Simple Church, but I think something like that is a helpful read. Hey, we got all this stuff going on and we can't build any momentum, and nobody knows what's really that important. And so they kind of just pick and choose, and really they just don't really go to anything. Remember that the more you have going on, the less people will see the importance of going. So some of the things we do with our calendar is like we intentionally like don't do stuff, multiple big events or multiple events every single month. Even though I'm the type of person that's like, I'll work, I'll go, I'll do the thing, I'll show up. I just know that's not good, like for a healthy rhythm for our church and our people, because they're just not going to show up to stuff. So for example, I know this is this is not like a normal example, but like we do trunk or treat once a year, and it's a big push, and it's our biggest all-in event of the year outside of a Sunday, maybe like Christmas, Easter, that sort of thing. And it does really well. And people sign up to do trunks, which is like a big lift. People sign up to serve. We do all these sort of things. If we did a trunk or treat every single month, nobody would show up. If we did it 3 times a year, which I know you wouldn't because, Halloween's only once in October, so I get that. But just for the sake of argument, if we did it 3 times a year, it would be hard to lift every single year. But doing it once a year makes it a bigger deal when it happens. So you just got to be cognizant of that. The more you have going on, the less importance people will have to go into the things that you have going on. And so actually, I guess in this cliche example, or this cliche saying is true, less really is more. Less really is more. So again, to recap all those quickly, plan 6 to 12 months out. Number 1. Number 2, there's a difference between Sunday events and non-Sunday events when you're planning your church calendar. Number 3, don't plan multiple things the same week or weekend if it is a larger church event or invitation. Number 4, consider what you will announce from stage, email, etc. when you plan your schedule. Number 5, not everything your church does has to be a church quote-unquote event. Number 6, don't close up shop during the summer. And last but not least, number 7, remember the more you have going on, the less people will see the importance of going. So here is my observation for today's episode. It's this: the more you celebrate what God is doing outside your church, the more people will love their own church. It's kind of funny. Obviously New City, we're really, really big on being a part of church plants and funding church plants and, just personally excited about that. Very much Team Jesus. And what I've seen over the years, assessing church planners, that sort of thing, is the number of church planners who are quote unquote being sent out from their church, but not really, because their church kind of use it as like a competition because they're planting in the same town, or they don't really like let the person who they're quote unquote sending out like share from stage, but maybe once because they don't want people to go. Man, it just creates this like awkward thing. And it creates a distrust in the church. It's like, hey, this person's planning a church. Why aren't we talking about it? The other thing, the flip side of that is the churches that are like, hey, this is what we do. We talk about other churches. We promote other churches. The ironic thing is that like it really helps people love your own church. So for us, and we're just the average size church. Like we are not, if you were to come to New City on Sunday, it's like we're just normal, like not very impressive at all. But we got this banner in our hallway of all the church plants that we've helped fund. And 2 weeks ago, we did our next church plant. As when this episode is coming out, we're revealing our next church plant. So we're about to support 2 more church plants. And so we like have this like big banner that we have printed out of all the churches we've helped support over the years. And most of them are probably within a 45-minute drive of New City. I feel like kind of some ways the closer the better. And so we're always pushing and promoting. And I do know that we have lost some people to some of these church plants. Like for a fact that has happened. I know people have gone with them, which is great. But the flip side, we've had people come in and say like, that sign is really cool. Or they go through our weekender process or whatever, and they like really dig New City Church because we are so open-handed with these things. And I would just say the people that we have lost, which hasn't been a lot, but the people that we have lost is not comparable to the people that like just love that their church does this. And I would just say this too, to reassure you, man, if somebody is like, likes the church, likes your church and they're part of it and they're excited about it, they're not going to want to like leave to go to some other church plant unless the Lord is really, really calling them. And so I never personally feel very scared, for lack of a better word, to have a new church planter come, even that's close to us. Cause I'm like, man, if someone loves New City, like they're in. And if somebody, for whatever reason, isn't fully connected at New City and they want to go to this church plant and they get connected, that's the win. Cause I'd rather them go to a church and be connected than kind of just sit on the sideline. So I would just say the more you celebrate what God is doing outside your church, whether it's other church plants, other churches or whatever, the more people actually like love their own church, because they realize you're actually Team Jesus. So I'll just say, don't be afraid to do it. It will encourage your people. And it's been a great experience for New City Church. The personal growth tip for this episode might sound counterintuitive, but I have at least personally found it to be true. And that's this. Generally speaking, again, there are exceptions. Generally speaking, the quicker you can get it done, the better. The quicker you can get it done, the better. Here's why. It's not about how hard or how long you work, but rather it is about the problems you actually solve. Therefore, it is a helpful question to ask yourself, how can I make this easier? Whether it's a sermon prepping or planning for an event or a conversation you have to have or any number of tasks you have going on, how can I make this easier? So for example, here are a few questions that I ask myself about sermon writing, which is something I do almost every single week. And you can adapt these questions for your big recurring tasks as well, whether it's sermon writing or something else. So some of the questions I ask myself: what distractions am I allowing that break my focus when studying and writing? So what distractions am I allowing that break my focus when studying and writing? What other preachers could I ask and learn from regarding their sermon writing process? So who could I ask and about what they do? Here's another question I've asked before. Is the environment I write sermons in conducive to sermon writing? So am I somewhere where I can be interrupted easily? Is there a more efficient way to capture notes or sermon illustrations? Do I sermon prep when my energy and focus are at a high point during the day versus a low point? And the last question is this: since sermon writing is one of the most mentally demanding parts of my job, am I prioritizing it on my schedule? Side note here, and I'm not, if it works for you, then do it. But, a lot of guys, maybe because like in church planning, it feels quote unquote missional. They're like, well, I sermon prep in a coffee shop so I can talk to people. I just think that's a terrible idea. Because you're constantly stopping and starting. You're not probably have maybe the same setup you might have in an office or that sort of thing. Now, if you have to do it, this is not a knock against never prepping a sermon in a coffee shop. But my goal is to not spend 20 hours a week on sermon prep. And it's actually much better for me to be more efficient and, of course, put in the work, put in the study, but have a rhythm that produces the result I want, to be more efficient in that so that I have more time to meet people or to do other type of work at the coffee shop when I'm around and connecting and that sort of thing. So that's just a side note. You want to be, with sermon writing somewhere where it's conducive to actually helping you focus so that you can get it done quicker, but also you also can produce a better result. You see, it isn't about how much time it takes to write a sermon that matters. What matters is how helpful the sermons actually are. That's what matters. So 7 hours of sermon prep can consistently produce a better sermon than 12 hours of sermon prep if given the right conditions, study habits, and environment. Now, what I'm not saying is like try to do your sermon prep as quickly as possible, but I'm saying if option A, and you have option A and option B, and option B is 5 hours longer of sermon prep, but if that 5 hours longer includes checking your phone multiple times, stopping to have multiple conversations with a coffee shop multiple times, that's not 5 extra hours of actually focused work. So it's not actually good. So again, the question is, what is the quickest way you can solve the problem of your recurring tasks? The value you provide is more important than the time you spent on the problem. And so make it as easy as possible to solve it quickly. Then you can move on to the next thing. So today's question comes from a church planner I was talking to the other week and talking about people leaving their church in the launch phase, and they're about to launch. And so they're like, how do you do this? Especially, as the church gets planted and obviously people are going to leave. And I would just say, he was asking me this, here are a couple of general principles how I have learned to handle people leaving the church. I'm not saying this is the right or the only way. It's the way that I find it helpful. Okay. So here's how it goes when I find out someone who wants to leave New City or they tell me they're leaving. If they want to share, I will listen to their reasons why. Again, generally speaking, not generally speaking. If they want to share, I will listen to reasons why. But generally speaking, I will refrain from defending or sharing my side of the story. So if somebody's leaving because they're frustrated about something, I will hear them out. But I have learned explaining, well, here's why this decision was made, or here is how my perspective on what happened. And so here's why this was a result is not really helpful, because once people have already decided to leave, they're going to leave. And it can come across, even if this is not your intention, it can come across as like trying to keep them or trying to defend your decision when it's really not going to make that much of a difference. So as this was a lot harder in the beginning, now it's just like, because I've been through it enough after 8 years. If they want to share why they're leaving, listen, but I don't really share, if there is another side of the story to their frustration, I'm not going to really share it. Now, if it feels very like attacky or a question about character or integrity or decision-making process, like a competency thing, like you guys are just not better at this, I will kind of give some pushback there, but not to convince them, just enough to kind of talk about, well, here's why this happened. And you might disagree, but there's reasons for X, Y, or Z. So if they want to share, I will listen, but I wouldn't like try to kind of explain yourself as much as you might want to, because I just have found it's not really helpful. Also, I do not offer to meet with or go out of my way to connect with someone if they tell me they are leaving. Now, if somebody asks me to meet, absolutely, I will certainly do so. And sometimes we have people leave for very good reasons. They're moving 30-ish minutes away and they don't want to drive 30 minutes to a church now, because what happens a lot of new cities, we got people who are renting. They want to buy their first home. They can't afford it because it's really hard to buy a first home in Raleigh's growing area. And so they have to live 45 minutes away and they want to go somewhere closer. I totally get it. And so I kind of know when these conversations are happening, I'm happy to meet, talk about it, because those really aren't bad conversations. But if I've had people send me, not really a text, but I've had emails or I've had conversations on Sunday to say, hey, we're leaving. And I think sometimes people expect me to kind of follow up and kind of ask why. But it's like, here's the deal, man. If you're not going to tell me, I'm not going to beg it out of you. And I want to say this too. People can legitimately have legitimate real reasons that they're frustrated to leave. And they might be great, like legitimate reasons. And maybe if I was them, I'd do the same thing. But it's just not helpful for me to argue with them or to ask them like, oh, well, please meet and please stay. Like, I don't do that. If you're out, you want to go somewhere else, go somewhere else. Now, if someone I have a close relationship with, I'll talk with, but I've had really close friends. Not a lot of them, but I can think of specifically about 4 years ago, I had a really, really close friend of mine leave New City, and he kind of shared why. And I was like, hey man, great. Man, I appreciate you sharing, that sort of thing. And I could tell he wanted me to like do more, but he was checked out. And so there's no good that comes from it. So I don't go out of my way to offer to meet. Now you can, I'm not saying you shouldn't, but at this point I've done enough of those that I don't really find it to be productive or helpful. So if they're not going to offer to meet and they want me to like ask them to meet, I don't do that. I also say this, be as gracious as you can and pray for them after they leave. This really helps you, especially if it's like a frustrating reason for them leaving. I've just found to like pray for them for the next couple of weeks so they would get connected somewhere else. It really softens my heart towards them, and just be really gracious. As frustrating as it might feel, as unfair as some of these things can feel, I just try to be really gracious. I've gotten better at it over the years, partially because when you're a new church plant, you're like, is this thing going to survive? At this point, I'm like, New City's going to be fine. So I try to be gracious. And then I would say this, number 4, it could be really helpful, is truly believe that your church is not for everyone. Like I just genuinely believe that about New City. It's not something we just say. And so of course people are going to leave, because they might get connected somewhere else, or they might have someone, maybe they have this big theological position that's really important to them. And so they want to go to a church that aligns with that. Like, New City is not for everyone. Now, it doesn't mean I like for people to leave, or it doesn't affect me, or I don't get discouraged. Absolutely, I do. But like, we're just one of many churches in the Raleigh area and there's a lot of great churches in the Raleigh area, and we're not going to be for everyone. So part of me is like, that happens. And so it doesn't make it any easier, but I would just say, like, your church is not for everybody. And it's one thing to say that. It's another thing to actually genuinely believe it. And if you genuinely believe it, it will definitely help you with some of these conversations. And so that's a little bit of how I handle people leaving a New City Church. So as always, thanks for joining me today on the Practical Church Podcast. If you're new, we release a new episode every 2 weeks. So be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to. And if you're on YouTube, we also do a video version as well. If you want more from Mission Support, be sure to go to missionsupport.com. Talk to a guy today, learn about their graphics, videos, or any of their other number of services. One of the great things about Mission Support is they don't lock you into long-term contracts. New City uses Mission Support for bookkeeping and payroll, and it is a monthly thing. And if at any point we say, hey, we want to go another direction, we hired someone internally, there's no long-term contract. And so that's really, really helpful, really, really flexible. So be sure to check them out. If you want more from me, you can go to DylanDotson.com, subscribe to my Best Minute newsletter that I send out every Tuesday morning, some practical things to help you in your faith and in your life. And man, thanks for being with us. And I'll be back with you in 2 weeks for another episode of the Practical Church Podcast.